cost of holding cash, right? Because you have to pay at least 4% to the holder, plus you have to pay CRR, SLR, correct? So you have to maintain those reserves on your liability book. This amount of money has to be lent to someone else. Now, you got so much money in a matter of 2 months or 3 months or whatever, it was 1.5 months, but let's assume in 2 months or 3 months. Now, this money was lent into the mutual fund industry for a shorter term period, because mutual fund industry in India generally borrows for a shorter, so they issue commercial papers, or they trade in commercial papers only for a shorter period of time. All the mutual funds borrowed money through the form of the commercial papers which were issued by the banks, and the investors then invested into the fund. So all this was short term. Now, who ultimately borrowed this money at the end was NBFCs. You clear? So banks through mutual funds lent it to NBFCs. Now NBFCs borrowed this money on the shorter end of the curve, which is for 3 months, 6 months, 8 months, and they lent on the longer tenor. So 20 years back when I started my career, my first boss or my first boss told me a very simple thing. Remember, in credit, you always have to short assets, long liabilities. Short assets, long liabilities. Because liabilities are unpredictable. In a high growth country like India, where inflation is by and large relatively on a higher side, and the differential between the income and the expenditure growth is always going to be higher. So, and there are a lot of Indians here. Do you think your income jumps every year in the same proportion as your expenditure? The answer is no. So, which means in a country of 1.3 billion people, the number of people who want to borrow money would always be higher. If they always be higher, which means asset creation is relatively an easier job, whilst liabilities is a challenging job. And exactly that's what NBFC didn't do. They borrowed, they leveraged to the hilt. They borrowed for 3 months, they lent it for 3 years. They borrowed for 9 months, they lent it for 9 years. And then all of a sudden ILFS happened. The music stopped. These 3 months papers which were issued couldn't be rolled over. Now I have lent to Mr. Matu for 9 years. I can't ask the money back. There is no liquidity of this asset, and I can't generate more liabilities. And that's what got accentuated. Now this went to a different level. It started from NBFCs, then it went to the corporates, and it formed, as you say, that first you start with a trickle, then it takes the form of an enthusiasm, and then it happens contagion. And now it is a contagion. And what is lacking in the debt markets is very simple: the trust factor. So I'm not sure whether if I give 100 rupees to Mr. Singh, he's an extremely credible guy, whether he will return my money back or not.
Not today.
Very well said, sir. So that's the challenge. That's the challenge. So to answer your questions, if you still, there was a point in time, you have come at a better time in India. There was a point in time 12 months back when corporates were struggling for the working capital. Forget capex. Now, if that is the scenario, where are you going to go? So whatever, first you have to survive, then you will expand, then you will grow. And that's why most Indian corporates who couldn't get money in India easily, they raised money abroad.
So I think just to add to what you're saying, quite a few Indian companies had established beachheads overseas. They had funding requirement overseas. They've gone and acquired companies overseas. So the requirement for funds in foreign currency is used in foreign currency, and you don't have to bring the money back into India. So some of the money is not even hedged, and some of these companies have earnings in foreign currency, and therefore don't need to hedge in any case. So all of that works in our favor currently. Dr. Matu, just to ask you, you did mention about